Good afternoon. I'm Father David. Thank you for joining me today for Disciple Time as we are looking at the strength of openness and humility. And have you ever thought about how difficult it is sometimes to accept help because of our own station in life? In our gospel readings today, we see many times when, in fact, the Pharisees and the Sadducees or the reputable scribes were unable to accept the teachings of Christ because of their status and basically the ego and pride that kind of got in their way because of that status. And think about some of the high priests, maybe in the temple, and the great scholarly teachers in Jesus' day, and how difficult it must have been for them to really stop and hear and listen to what Jesus was saying, because really Jesus was an unknown in their academic and ecclesiastical circles. And if we put this kind of in today's culture, we can see how difficult it would be possibly for, say, a successful CEO to take advice from a mailroom clerk on efficiency. Or what about a surgeon taking advice from a nurse on dressing a particular wound? Or how hard would it be for a long standing bishop to take advice on preaching from, say, a deacon or a layperson? The simple truth is, we can develop a certain pride that is associated with our education, with our wealth, and with our status and position in life. And in our gospel reading today, we see something interesting about Jesus. He was never really that worried about human status and station, and he never let it get in the way of who he offered his healing advice and teaching to. In fact, it says here in Mark 12:14a, the Pharisees and Herodians came and said to Jesus, "Teacher, we know that you are a truthful man and that you are not concerned with anyone's opinion. You do not regard a person's status, but teach the way of God in accordance with the truth." Now, when I read that, it really makes me think, who am I too proud to take the advice from? I think that's the question that we need to ask. Is it someone of a lower status or position, someone with less education than I? Is it someone with less material wealth? Is it someone younger than me? You know, or what about a homeless person, right? If a homeless person came up and told me I was making some mistakes with how I was living, how would I receive the homeless person's advice given their position and station in life versus my own? And, I think at this point we kind of have to stop, because we need to remember that Jesus himself was, for all intents and purposes, a homeless person. And so we tend to look at people certain ways based on how we've been taught by our culture. And it's no different for the Sadducees and the Pharisees of Jesus' day. And so we can't be too hard on them, because if we flip the skit around and we try to put it in our own perspective, we see how difficult it might have been for people in these very established positions and stations in life with very formal academic teaching and all this to accept and to maybe listen in a very real way the teachings of this wandering itinerant person, if they weren't really sure about his identity yet, right? So as I was looking at the Old Testament readings today, I also saw how this problem of pride can kind of get in the way, right? So our ego and our pride can be very sneaky in how it shuts us down to receiving help sometimes, or to listening to people. And so we see in the Old Testament reading, from Tobit today. Let me just pull that up here. How Tobit was really slowly going blind, right? So it says in our reading in Tobit 2:10, I did not know that sparrows were perched on the wall above me. Their warm droppings settled in my eyes, causing white scales on them. I went to the doctors for the cure, but the more they applied ointments, the more my vision was obscured by the white scales until I was totally blind. For 4 years I was unable to see, and all my kindred were distressed at my condition. Ahikar, however, took care of me for 2 years until he left for Elam. Now, as we read on, we see Tobias's case that in his case, due to Tobias's health, his wife, Anna, had to end up going to work and virtually became the breadwinner of the family in a time when men were really kind of in the position to be doing that. And so maybe, just maybe, there's someone out there today that can relate to this situation where a health issue has crept in and created a financial difficulty. And this can be hard on the family, especially kind of in traditional conservative old school families where maybe the man feels like it's his duty to be the breadwinner for the home and the family. And, if a man loses his ability to work in that kind of a situation, it can really be hard on his pride. And I think it could be hard for any man to be able to lose his ability to work. That's just really difficult. And so we see something interesting here in Tobit chapter 2, verse 12b through 13. It says, on the 7th day of the month of distress, Anna finished the woven cloth and delivered it to her employers. So she was working, right? They paid her the full salary and also gave her a young goat for a meal. On entering my house, the goat began to bleat. So I called to my wife and said, where did this goat come from? It was not stolen, was it? Give it back to its owners. We have no right to eat anything stolen. So we learn as we read this story that the goat was actually a bonus for Anna for a job well done on the things that she was delivering to her employers. But Tobias just has this fit over it. And eventually, Anna has to call Tobit out, her own husband, on his pride and how it's getting in the way of receiving simple help from people, especially kind of her. And so sometimes I think we can all get into this situation, right? That we have trouble sometimes accepting help from certain people because maybe our pride gets in the way. But how unfortunate that is, right? The truth is sometimes we just need to surrender our pride. And surrender the pride, especially that is associated with our position, maybe pride that's brought about because of our education or our perceived personal experience in a field, and kind of recognize that God can communicate to us and bring us help and healing through some sources that we might not be open to if our pride and ego is in the way, right? And so what is our application for today? It's kind of simple, really. It's let's just be humble and open to the ways and to the people through whom God communicates his love and healing to us.
Christ.